Sacred geometry is the study of mathematical principles and proportion at work in the forms of nature and art, and contemplating their symbolic meaning. Each number, from 1 to 10, can be thought of as a corresponding shape, with the number 1 as a circle or a sphere. Plato declared the sphere to be the most perfect shape because of the equidistance from the center to the surface. A symbol of wholeness and perfection is synonymous with spirit. God is a circle whose circumference is boundless and whose center is everywhere. The earth is round. The eye is round. We see through a pupil that dilates or contracts, letting in more or less light, helping us see clearly, adjusting to whatever conditions arise. This well-rounded worldview is probably why we respond so deeply to the circular mandala in sacred art traditions. The center-focused composition is a symbol of the soul. The practice of creating mandalas in any medium may help restore our inner psychic balance. I've found this to be true. Drawing sacred geometric figures with a compass and straight edge, we bring our attention to one-pointedness and discover correspondences between the one and the many. One of the greatest teachers of sacred geometry was the late Keith Critchlow, architect, artist, author, and beloved advisor to the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. One of the first things Keith noted in his classes was the symbolic meaning of each shape, like the circle is the spirit. Then he explained the square represents matter, the physical world of forms. Connecting these two worlds of matter and spirit is the mind, symbolized by a triangle. Then he noted how these three shapes are remixed constantly in sacred architecture. A rectangular box-like room feels differently from a domed space. And using the doorway as an example, a squared-off opening stays rooted in the material plane. A half-circle arch on top symbolically brings heaven to earth. And a Gothic arch adds an upward-pointing triangular influence of the mind on the dome of heaven. The Gothic arch thus becomes a composite of the shapes of body, mind, and spirit. The pointed arch is a major component of mosques as well, which is the actual source of inspiration for cathedral architecture. Some years ago, we went to Granada, Spain, and studied a masterpiece of Islamic architecture, the Alhambra, with Keith. This was the place that M.C. Escher said was his greatest influence. The Alhambra is a place of profound beauty that Keith helped us explore. The complex geometries of the Alhambra visually demonstrate how spirit can be symbolized in infinite patterns of interconnectedness. Keith wrote one of the definitive texts on Islamic pattern making. Keith also analyzed the underlying geometric structure of flowers in his last book, a masterpiece that examines the mysterious shapes of petals and number of petals for dozens of flowers and plants that surround us and bring our lives beauty. Photographing the faces of flowers and plants, I've been counting their petals and noting resonant shapes recurring within their faces. Like in a three-leaf clover, there's another triangular pattern within the leaves. Artists study and appreciate what makes things beautiful. Are there blueprints of beauty that our unconscious knows before our conscious mind recognizes and describes them? This was the premise of an experiment performed by brain researchers in Italy who published the results in 2007. The brain apparently responds strongly to beauty in the right amygdala and insula region. Only artworks that displayed the golden ratio elicited such a response from the brain. Ancient artists and architects of Egypt and Greece were familiar with the golden ratio, and its secrets have been passed along from one artist guild to another. At times, the mysteries of sacred geometry seemed lost to antiquity, but then devoted observers of nature's harmonic system of proportions rediscover these once esoteric codes. The golden ratio is the proportion of 1 to 1.618, the lesser and the greater. We find this magical proportion displayed throughout the human body, like in the phalanges of our fingers. If you imagine the body as one line, the navel is at the golden ratio, also called the golden cut. Renowned sacred geometer Father Desiderius Lenz, a 19th century German artist who became a Benedictine monk and co-founder of the Boiron Art School. He believed that devoted artists should work together in community to create a sacred art in a committed spiritual environment. Father Desiderius had measured the statuary of Egypt and Greece, and he came up with an ideal proportion for the human figure, which he used in his church murals. For the doors of Entheon and Cosm, and for a painting of a face, I adapted this grid for design. Lenz differentiated the male and female geometries by embedding the golden ratio in the divine feminine. Each sacred tradition that permits depiction of the figure has its canons of proportion and geometries of humanity and the gods. Since getting my golden ratio calipers, I've been measuring a lot of things. It's fun to look at a painting or statue that you love and then use a golden ratio caliper to analyze the composition. Michelangelo definitely knew about this because he had studied Greek statuary and wished to infuse the classic proportions and idealist wisdom of the ancients with the Gothic spirit of his times. Renaissance translations of the Neoplatonists opened fresh avenues of philosophical perspective beyond Christianity. Analyzing one of my favorite Michelangelo drawings, The Dream, the golden ratio seems to focus the viewer at the most important points. His famous Sistine Chapel fresco, where God gives the spark of life to Adam, the place where their fingers nearly meet, is the golden ratio. In many of my own works, I've applied the golden ratio. In the light worker, the heart and the eye correspond to the position of the lesser and greater quantities of the picture plane. In the painting God Self, the three eyes are each located at the golden cut. Understanding and integrating the compositional strategies of the masters is one of the ways we can improve our work. The call of the artist is to enhance and highlight the beautiful, which is ultimately beyond measure. The philosopher Friedrich Schelling believed nothing is a work of art which does not display an infinite, either directly or at least by reflection. The infinite, finitely displayed, is beauty.